In 1981, Sandra Day O'Connor became the first woman to conquer the frontier of the Supreme Court of the United States, bringing a fresh perspective to our nation's highest court and opening the door for women and other minorities to sit on the court, impacting not just the judiciary, but the mindset of the entire government and the workforce as a whole.
Sandra Day was born in El Paso, Texas in 1930 and spent her childhood on her family's ranch in Arizona. Wrangling cattle and doing chores around the ranch helped her form a strong work ethic and learn resourcefulness. A bright child, Sandra's parents sent her to live with her grandmother in El Paso during the school year to have better educational opportunities, as there were limited options for a young woman near her family's ranch. She graduated from high school 2 years early and fulfilled her father's dream of attending Stanford University, where she received her bachelor's degree in economics, followed by her Stanford Law degree in 1952. She married law school classmate John J. O'Connor shortly following her graduation. Her classmates described her as poised, not only bright but lots of fun, and endowed with a comfortable, quiet strength.
After graduation, though she was very well qualified, O'Connor struggled to find paying work as women were undervalued and underrepresented in the legal profession.
From law firms all over California saying, Stanford law graduates, call us if you want to get an interview for employment. We'd be happy to talk to you. I called at least 40 of those firms asking for an interview, and not one of them would give me an interview. I was a woman, and they said, we don't hire women.
O'Connor was finally granted an interview with the district attorney in San Mateo County, California. O'Connor offered to work for free and share an office with the secretary just to have the opportunity to practice law.
And that was my first job as a lawyer. I worked for no pay, and I put my desk in with the secretary. But I loved my job.
O'Connor did eventually begin making money from that job, before moving to Germany to serve as a civilian attorney for the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps. Upon her return to the United States in 1957, O'Connor and her husband settled in Arizona, and she opened a private practice. O'Connor took a break from practicing law to start a family and begin raising her 3 children. But after her youngest son began school, she felt a draw to return to law and politics and began working as the Assistant Attorney General of Arizona, and then, in 1969, was appointed to the Arizona State Senate as a Republican to fill a vacated seat. She was re-elected to that position twice and became the first female majority leader in any state senate.
Women are as capable as men of handling all of the jobs from start to finish at state government level and at federal government level. That's very important.
During her time in the Arizona State Senate, O'Connor supported bills to remove sex-based references from state laws, to expand the number of positions open to women by removing outdated job restrictions, and to reform male-biased community property laws. Even her opponents admired her. Democratic Senator Alfredo Gutierrez once commented, "She worked interminable hours and read everything there was. It was impossible to win with her. We'd go to the floor with a few facts and let rhetoric do the rest. Not Sandy. She would overwhelm you with her knowledge."
While some hoped O'Connor would run for governor of Arizona, her eye remained steady on the law. She was elected to a seat in the Superior Court of Maricopa County in 1975, and 4 years later, Governor Bruce Babbitt appointed her to the State Court of Appeals. While she worked in Arizona, O'Connor helped found the Arizona Women Lawyers Association and the National Association of Women Judges. She gained a reputation for being tough but fair and thoughtful. Phoenix attorney Alice Bentheim recalled, "She was hell on lawyers who weren't prepared, and you had to say something awfully funny to get her to smile on the bench. But I liked her courtroom because you were always treated with dignity there. You always got a fair shake."
During his 1980 presidential campaign, challenger Ronald Reagan lagged behind the incumbent Jimmy Carter in the polls for female voters. He made a promise 2 weeks before Election Day that if he was elected, he would appoint a woman to the Supreme Court. Many in Reagan's administration didn't take his promise seriously and remained skeptical that he would put a woman on the court. But then Attorney General William French Smith recalled Reagan saying, "Now, if there are no qualified women, I understand, but I can't believe there isn't one. It's going to be a woman." So when Justice Potter Stewart notified President Reagan that he would be stepping down, Smith's short list of potential justices contained only women's names.
While O'Connor's name was the least well-known on the list, her knack for making friends and connections meant she had many powerful higher-ups and friends in her corner. Law school friend William Rehnquist had been appointed to the court in 1972, and O'Connor had also developed a friendship with Warren Burger, then Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, at a lake trip following a legal conference in 1979. Both men lobbied for O'Connor's appointment to the court. She traveled to Washington, D.C. for an interview in June of 1981, and her nomination was officially announced on July 7th, to much of the nation's and even her own surprise.
And his decision was as much a surprise to me as it was to the nation as a whole. But Ronald Reagan knew that his decision was not about Sandra Day O'Connor. It was about women everywhere. It was about a nation that was on its way to bridging a chasm between genders that had divided us for too long.
The news of a woman being appointed to the court was electrifying. Her confirmation hearings were the first to ever be broadcast on live television, showing the effect that O'Connor had on the court and the nation. There were more requests for press credentials than there had been for the Senate Watergate Committee hearings in 1973. The final hurdle for O'Connor before she conquered the frontier of the highest court in the land was the approval of the Senate. She met with senators and potential opponents, studied constitutional law, and visited the chambers where the hearing would be held, and her preparations paid off. Sandra Day O'Connor became the 102nd Justice of the Supreme Court and was sworn in on September 25, 1981, after being approved 99-0.
During her time on the Supreme Court, O'Connor found both admiration and opposition from those on both sides of the aisle. Progressives and feminists around the country lost their enthusiasm for her appointment when she joined the well-established conservative alliance between Justices Warren Burger and William Rehnquist, while at the same time, far-right conservatives criticized Reagan for appointing a so-called abortionist to the court.
Though O'Connor was nervous about her new role, she was thrilled about the impact she could make in a court with much higher stakes than she had ever faced. She received some 60,000 letters in her first year, more than any other justice in history. Some were supportive, but many were not, so O'Connor had to learn to shrug off insults and focus on the job.
Well, I think it had to be to perform my duties here in such a way that it left the door open to put additional women on the court as time went by. That was the thing. You didn't want to serve as a woman and do a lousy job, so they weren't going to have another one as long as they could help it. I didn't want that.
Though she joined the court as a recognized conservative, by the end of her tenure, O'Connor was labeled as moderate or centrist, gaining a reputation for being unpredictable and independent, a key swing vote in many cases.
O'Connor was admired by her contemporaries for her centrism and fairness. Justice Stephen Breyer said about her, "Sandra has a special talent, perhaps a gene, for lighting up the room that she enters, for helping to restore good humor in the presence of strong disagreement, for helping to reduce results that are constructive, for helping those at odds today to remember that tomorrow is a new day."
When she retired in 2006, Sandra Day O'Connor had made an immense impact on not just the Supreme Court, but in all government jobs and other fields.
We began to have women on state Supreme Courts and appellate courts almost immediately and in almost every state. And that was just a marvelous thing for me to see. And it opened opportunities for women in other fields, not just judicial.
Her appointment to the Supreme Court was a new frontier for women in politics, especially in the judiciary, opening the door for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who began serving alongside O'Connor in 1993. More women also broke racial barriers on the court, like Sonia Sotomayor, who became the first Hispanic and Latina justice in 2009, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first black woman to sit on the court, in 2022. These women understand and admire O'Connor's contribution to progress and breaking the gender barrier.
Sandra Day O'Connor conquered the frontier of the Supreme Court of the United States through her tenacity, insight, and perseverance as a woman. Even facing discriminatory obstacles, O'Connor fought for her position on the Supreme Court, as well as becoming one of the most influential driving forces for equality among the workforce in her time. In turn, she not only impacted the workforce, but publicly presented fundamentals of equality, widening the vision of the government and the United States as a whole on matters of women holding positions of power in more extensive settings than just the Supreme Court.